This episode is brought to you by Prime. What if you had one more chance with the one that got away?
Sam.
You came home.
Based on the best-selling novel from Carly Fortune. Every Year After follows childhood friends Sam and Percy as they reunite in the dreamy, nostalgic lakeside town of Barry's Bay.
Love can be hard to find. So if you're lucky enough to find that person, never let go.
A second chance at first love. Every Year After, now streaming only on Prime.
There's a moment in this conversation that I keep coming back to. Karen is 12 and a half years old. She's saved up enough money on her own to take care of something that no child should ever have to take care of. And then she goes and finds her dog, a stray that she named Boy, and she tells him everything. This was a really touching moment because before Karen became the woman who runs a foundation, who speaks to trauma survivors, who cared for the very parents who hurt her, who finally at 57 understood why a dog walked into a bedroom and grabbed her arm and led her to a river, she was just a kid trying to survive something that should never have been hers to carry. Her story is very heavy. It's layered and it's a lot, but so is she. And what she's done with all of it, the way that she's turned survival into service and silence into a book, a dark night by a river into a life built on love. That's the whole reason that I do this and have these conversations.
And as I raised the knife up to my father while he was asleep, my dog came in the room and grabbed the arm and he stopped it.
You're listening to the Life Shift Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Gilhooly. This show is built around one simple idea, that sometimes a single moment can change how we see everything. Each week, I talk with someone about the moment that shifted their life and how they learned to live differently after it. These are not stories about having it all figured out. They are stories about what it looks like to keep going once the story changes. Thank you for being here. Here's today's story. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Life Shift Podcast. I am here with Karen. Hello, Karen.
Hello, how are you?
I'm pretty decent. I just got back from a trip in New York City and got to see a bunch of shows. So I'm happy to be home and I'm happy to be talking to you despite the weight of the story that you're going to be sharing today. I think there's so much power in these stories and the hard ones are just as important to share as the super happy ones that people tend to lean towards, because that's what most of us were taught growing up, is that we don't share the hard things and we just celebrate the happy, birthdays and promotions and things like that. Did you have a similar thing where we had to keep everything quiet in your life?
Yes, very much so.
And that's part of your story too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you wanting to be a part of the Life Shift Podcast. I have talked to over 250 people now about these very pivotal line in the sand type moments, and all of them are so different, but also the human feelings around these moments seem to be very similar. And it's been a nice, refreshing going into year 5 now of being reminded of how common our humanity is and how much that we can go through, and very resilient human spirits that I get to now call kind of friends, of being able to talk to everyone. So I appreciate you just wanting to share your story in this way, in the Matt way on the Life Shift.
Yeah.
Are you sharing your story a lot these days?
We are. Yeah.
Because you just put out a book fairly recently.
Well, we put out a book in 2019. And since then I've been doing quite a bit of public speaking and volunteer speaking and trying to help trauma survivors.
That's fantastic and very noble of you. So thank you for doing that for the world. And just for listeners, if you listened, I guess a few weeks ago now, you heard Karen's sister as a podcast guest for the Life Shift. So that was a great conversation.
Yeah, Kathleen's my older sister.
And she mentioned you a few times, so you'll get to hear that.
Okay.
Yes. So before we get started and we get into your story, maybe you can tell us who Karen is in 2026. Like, how do you show up in the world? How do you identify these days?
I show up as a retired individual that is a grandmother and have a life partner who's wonderful. I have 4 grown children, run a foundation with my sister called Remarkably Resilient. and wrote a book back in 2019, Remarkably Resilient Community Matters. So really enjoying retirement finally, and then enjoying the work that we do to help others with their trauma and healing journeys. I'm also a practicing Reiki master, so I enjoy that work as well. So always helping, always full of joy, trying to find the next best thing.
Yeah, well, it doesn't sound like retirement to me. It sounds like you're
It's
doing
busy.
you're doing some work,
Yeah,
but it sounds like it's very meaningful work and
it
something
is.
that probably fills your cup more than other types of work.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so important to find these spaces that we can relate to and help others in the way that maybe only we can because of our own experiences. So kudos to you for helping so many people that maybe had to or felt like they had to be silent in the traumas that they were facing.
Yes, very much so.
Very beautiful. So not so beautiful. Maybe you can kind of paint the picture of your life leading up to this life shift moment, and you can go back as far as you need to, but give us a sense of who Karen was in the before this main pivotal moment that we're going to talk about today.
Well, the Karen before the main pivotal moment was a very quiet, complacent child, a twin, an identical twin, in a family of multi-generational incest abuse and neglect. And I happened to be the one that was picked on the most, and really thought that I was the child that was saving my sisters from the abuse, both from my father and my paternal grandfather. So, I was that child that just tried to comply, tried to be good, had to be silent out of fear, and still a very good student, loved dogs, loved to be around pets, and just tried to survive basically. So that was the Karen before my moment.
Well, I am so sorry to hear that. And I kind of knew that story after talking to your sister, but I can see how kids are going to feel differently. And it's interesting that you said that you felt like you were the one kind of saving, if you will, your sisters from this or other people from this. Do you recall a time in that earlier life in which you felt like a kid, was there ever a carefree moment in your life before that you can remember?
I don't remember that. I don't remember feeling carefree. I always felt full of worry, full of concern, always reading the room, always afraid of what was next. So no, I don't remember playing. I don't remember any of that. It was very, very intense for me.
Yeah. But the dog thing you mentioned,
I was one of those kids that, if I saw a dog on the way home and it looked like a stray, I was going to try to get it to come home with me.
Yeah. Well, that was probably, that your way of sharing the love that you had somewhere and probably finding it in return from the dogs, because we don't deserve dogs, they're just like,
well, they find you, and they're amazing creatures. And we were lucky that we had horses at the end of the field where we lived. And so my twin sister and I would sneak down there and spend a lot of time with horses. And so animals were really a refuge for me growing up.
And you mentioned too, in this time you felt like you needed to remain quiet because otherwise you might get in trouble. Was that quiet with everyone, not even talking to your twin sister or?
No, my twin sister and I apparently had our own language when we were little. So we only understood one another. But yeah, we talked about regular life things, not about hard things. So no, nothing was shared in terms of the experience.
Which is just so heavy for such. How old were you? Or this
Probably
was your whole life?
4 is the soonest I can remember.
Wow. That's a lot of responsibility to put on a child. And the unfortunate thing is now we know you weren't the only one in the world to be going through this, but I can imagine how that feels because that's all you know of life is that. Did you ever look at kids in your class or people around you that had this quote unquote normal existence as a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old?
I did. And I didn't understand that their life wasn't as much like mine because my norm was my norm. So I knew that they seemed happy. I knew that they seemed loved. And that was like something that I desired, but I didn't feel surprisingly as left out as one might imagine. And I really liked school. So I just immersed myself in school, and I was a very good student and tried to find the joy in those things.
Yeah. And the reason I asked that question is because I was 8 when my mom died, and I saw all the people around me with mothers. And so for me, but I also had more of an understanding of what that before was like, whereas yours was always that way from your memories. So for me, looking at other people, there was this weird like jealousy, but also like, am I happy for them? Or like, it was clear to me that I was now different. I was the kid with the dead mom. And so that's where that question came from. But I guess if you just don't understand what normal should be, your normal is normal.
Yeah, you don't like it, you're not enjoying it, but that's your norm. So
yeah. So this experience just continued to go on, and I'm guessing it leads to what your pivotal moment is, or just like take us a little bit further.
Well, we moved from Denver, Colorado, or Littleton, Colorado, to Kansas when I was 11. When I was 10 and a half, my twin and I were attacked by our grandfather. And that's where he happened to live in that small town in Kansas. And then my mom and dad decided to move us there when we were 11. So that was really hard for both Sharon and I, that we did have that shared experience. And then from then on, I was not only, in fear of my life from my father, but also from my grandfather. So when I was 12 and a half, my grandfather raped me and I became pregnant, and I had to fund my own abortion. I had to be quiet about it. So I was working as a waitress and cleaning motel rooms, surprisingly, at that age, because you could. And so I went ahead and went through that experience and almost didn't make it. It was not good. So that was a summer that I found my dog named Boy, and I named him Boy, and he was a rescuer for me, and he went everywhere with me and followed me around town, and I told him all my stories. And he was the one that I look now back at that time and I realize I was depressed, and I wouldn't have known that because I had no reason to know that. But I was surviving barely. And then one Sunday morning, I went upstairs when my mother was gone and my dad was home, and I heard him in the bedroom with my older sister. And so for that reason, my life shifted. I realized that I hadn't saved anyone, and I snapped, I think, in all sense, and decided that I was not going to live past that day, and neither were my parents. So I chose a knife, and I chose to memorize their room, and decided I would go around town and kind of silently say goodbye to everyone and all the things that I loved. And I snuck into their room that night after they were asleep. And as I raised the knife up to my father while he was asleep, my dog came in the room and grabbed the arm, and he stopped it. And I remember just being frozen, and then him tugging on my arm, taking me out of the house, literally. And I used to sit with him across the street at a river, and he brought me over there and just sat with me. And I just cried and I cried and I cried. And I decided right then and there that, my life would be different. And I heard a voice that was not a voice I had ever heard before. And it was so distinct. It said, "You are loved. You must believe that you are loved, and you will spread love the rest of your life." And it was such a calming thing that I stopped crying. I sat there and said, what that means is what I said was the universe. I called it the universe because we weren't allowed to believe in God. We were supposed to be atheists. And the universe told me to be loving and to keep doing that and that I would survive all of this. So from then on, literally, as bad as it got for me, I chose love. And somehow that helped me survive the rest of the abuse that occurred clear until I graduated. And I just decided that life would be important for me and I would love others and I would want to understand this behavior. It became a mission of mine to understand, why do people act like this and what happened to them. And so early on, I wanted to be in the Waltons family on TV. And so Mary Ellen Walton was a nurse and I just loved her. And I decided I would be a nurse and I would go help people. And I also loved all the EMT shows and I would be an EMT and that's what I would do. And so I actually was the first one to leave the family in terms of when I went to college, my freshman year, I enrolled to be a medical physician. But my father, as normal, when I came home for spring break, he knew I had a serious boyfriend and he always broke everything up. So he tried to break that up by telling me that I would be coming home that summer and staying home. And I just couldn't do it. So I pretended like that's what I was going to do and then went back to college and without my twin sister's knowledge or my older sister's knowledge, talked to my boyfriend and said I had to tell him what had happened with me, which was hard.
Yeah.
And then I just basically said, I'm going to be leaving. I don't know where. I don't know if I'm either going to leave or end my life. I was at that point. But I didn't want anybody to feel sorry for me. He promptly said, no, that's not what's going to happen. We're going to get married and then he'll leave you alone. And I seriously thought that's what was going to happen. So we did that. And it turned out to be what was supposed to be a private wedding. The night before I got married, I did call my mother and say, Mom, this is what I'm doing. Now, I basically want left alone. And Dad didn't see it that way. So he came after me and I found out through a friend that he was going to come take me. So the police had to get involved and we ended up leaving the state and I left college and the fear was so great that we started a new life in Iowa after that. So I didn't complete college and life happened after that. So, and my family thought that I had just gone crazy and my dad still really controlled everyone in the family. So he controlled the narrative. And so I was without my entire family for 5 years and, became a young mother to one child and then a second child. But so I would say, the first shift definitely when I was 12 and a half, the second when I had to name what was happening when I was 19 years old and decided to go on with life. And I think that the important part there was I was forced into therapy myself because as my son started to mature, he was only, I believe he was 18 months old. I realized that I didn't know how to parent. And I realized that I also did not know how to play. I didn't know how to play with him. And so I thought I better learn how to do this because children learn by playing. And so it was one of those things that I said, well, go into therapy. So I was lucky to have a really good therapist for 4 years that really helped me get through a lot of that trauma and helped me understand who I was, where my power was, what kind of parent I could be. And I just thank her so much. She got me started on the right track.
That's so challenging, like trauma after trauma. I mean, you lived trauma day in, day out till 19, but then the trauma stayed because there was so much fear built up in this experience. And I mean, I'm so sorry about when you were 12 and a half. I mean, that's like, you shouldn't even have to be thinking, well, first of all, you shouldn't be thinking of the abuse that you were encountering, but then to become pregnant in that way, like, I can't imagine another 12-year-old like having the wherewithal to even know what to do next.
Yeah, I had to figure it out.
Yeah.
So it was very difficult, and I did
And
my best.
abortions weren't a thing. Like, they
No,
weren't,
no.
you had to find a way
Yeah,
to
you had
have
to
something.
find somebody, and I luckily lived through it, which I probably shouldn't have.
Well, I'm glad you did.
But I did.
Yeah, no, it's your story is one of those cases in which someone hears one part of it and it's like, I don't know how you survive that. And then you tell another part, and it just layer after layer. And here, as you describe yourself happy and joyful and finding that space, that probably took a lot of work. And I commend you for that.
But again, I think that deep need to understand really helped me. And then I did go on to become an EMT and then eventually nursing school. And as I learned through therapy and through my psychology classes, I started to understand what had happened to my father and why my mother was so afraid. And it didn't excuse anything, but it made me understand that there was some kind of a cycle that can be broken, and people need to get help and may not even realize that help is out there or that they can change. And so it became just this huge desire for me to be very understanding, to give grace, to listen, to try and point individuals to help when I could. And I just always had this real strong belief that no one was born evil and there was good in everyone. And that's kind of what had driven me all along. So people are like, don't you hate your parents? But I didn't feel hate. I did not feel hate. I felt like I wanted to help and I wanted to understand. So more than anything, I probably felt grief for the childhood I never had. But then watching my children play was so freeing. And I got to see children be children, and I knew that I would never let anyone hurt them. And that was healing in itself as well.
Yeah.
So
I would imagine too, I'm thinking of when you took back control as far as like seeking therapy and all these pieces that come along with finding out who you were deep down and who you could be and all the things that you weren't really allowed to explore as a child because of your circumstances. It almost feels more freeing and more, I don't know, empowering than the thing you thought you wanted to do to your parents and yourself as a teenager, where that could solve one problem but create a whole other thing. And here you are, no, like, I'm going to take care of myself and others in that way. And I don't know, I know a lot of people that have experienced depression and really dark moments in their lives, myself included. It's so much easier to stay in that. So that's why I commend you for focusing on the good and that there is good in people, because I tell you, that's the hard road. That's the hard road.
Your call has been forwarded to voicemail.
Hi, this is Zoe Deutsch.
And Nick Robinson. Our brand new movie, Voicemails for Isabel, is all about those little moments that feel like the universe is looking out.
Feeling homesick, then your sister calls.
Hearing that perfect song exactly when you need it. Sometimes life rigs things in our favor, like learning about your new favorite rom-com, Voicemails for Isabel. Now playing only on Netflix.
I never understood that moment, and I had been embarrassed about it for years and kept it hidden from everyone until I talked to a pastor when I was 57, 58 years old. And I remember I told her my story, and I told her that story. And I said, I've never really understood that moment. And I'm so grateful for it, because I could have not been here. I could have been incarcerated. And she just looked at me and she said, "You know what, Karen?" And I said, "What?" And she goes, "Sometimes God comes to you in a form that you can recognize." And I went, wow, like, wow, he was that for me. And I recognized the form, and I have a firm belief that that's what happened, and super strong for me. So it was nice to understand that finally, years and years and years later. And then to be able to tell my sisters, and relieve myself when we were writing the book of that guilt. So those were pivotal times for me.
I want to ask you about the moment that you had to share what happened to you with your boyfriend at the time, or I don't know if you were fiance yet, but like, was there power in that? Did you feel different when you had told this to someone else in this way?
I felt guilty that he might choose to rescue me. And I did not want to put that burden on him. He assured me that that was not the case, that he loved me. I felt dirty. I felt ashamed. I felt scared. I felt all of that. But I knew my father, and I knew that if we did not get police protection, it was going to be bad. So I did not want any of that to happen. So I had to tell the police, why they needed to protect me, and, made sure I told them I didn't want anyone hurt, that we would be willing to leave the state if they escorted us to the border and, just go hide. And I just wanted away at that point. I just wanted to be away.
So there was no relief or anything for you sharing that? Like getting it out of you with someone else, or had you shared it with other people before that?
No, I had not. I don't think there really was relief in that, because the fear was still there. He was still alive. Luckily, my grandfather was dead at that point. So I carried that fear. And it wasn't until the therapist helped me confront him, I was 24 years old, that the fear left. And my life really changed in the sense that someone wasn't chasing me,
Yeah.
So
did you confront him?
And I did confront him. Yes.
Okay.
I did confront him. My then husband, which was the young man that I married, was very angry that I was going to go do that. He was very fearful for me and did not want me to do that. But I knew I had to. So I drove myself back down to Kansas and confronted both he and my mother, and just basically told him I'm not afraid anymore. And if you ever touch me, this time I will end your life. And I meant it. And I felt like I needed to say that. And he backed away and said, we can open up the wounds and bleed again, or recognize that they're there. And that was the only apology I got, which isn't really an apology.
Did you maintain a relationship with them, or no?
I actually did. My mother first with my children. I eventually let her see them and had an on again, off again relationship. My father, not till years later. But then after my nursing education, I ended up, when they became elderly, taking care of both of them. They had gotten divorced. And again, people are like, how could you do that? And I was like, well, in my mind, they were elderly, vulnerable individuals that needed help.
You are a bigger person than so many of us.
Well, and then for me, and it wasn't necessarily for, my twin or my older sister, I felt the need to hear their stories. And I felt the need, particularly with my mother, to have a mother. And she hadn't been one. And so I took her in and actually taught her to be one, as she was older. And I remember she would say, good night, whatever. And I'd say, oh, well, you meant to say good night. I love you. And she'd say, oh, yeah, I love you. And then I'd say, you might have meant to even give me a hug, and she'd give me a hug. And she would learn. She would watch me parent and she would learn. And, it took probably the first 3 years before I felt like I was finally getting a mother. But then we became close. And, I was able to put aside the things that I needed to put aside. And because my desire to have a mother was stronger than my desire to retaliate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of goodness in your heart. And I don't know that a lot of people would have chosen the road that you did and
It was
for
the one.
yourself.
Yeah, it was the one I needed to. It was the journey I needed.
No, I mean, I think it's beautiful. I think should we all be so resilient in this way and move through the world? I mean, if I don't know if this will sound right, but I think if we're lucky enough to find that space of reflection and self-awareness and understanding of the circumstances that we were in don't necessarily make who we are in the long run. And I say lucky enough because sometimes many people can't get past that barrier because of one thing or another. And it's just, like I said before, it's much easier to stay in the darkness than it is to find the light in everything. And you're like the epitome of like finding that light and creating something that you need/want in your life to make your life better now. And I mean, just love that.
Yeah, I think for me, since childhood was so dark, I really did want the light. I really did want to find joy. And if anybody, anybody you talk to about me will tell you that I find joy every day in something. So, and I'm really, I really do enjoy life. And I was so lucky to have good counselors along the way and incredible strong women around me, an incredible shaman that taught me a lot. And I've continued to go into therapy when I need to. Mm-hmm. That's probably one of the most disappointing things for me is I always thought I was at a point where, well, you're better. You're past this, and then something would trigger mm-hmm. Something in me. And I'd be like, you know what? You need to do some more work.
Yeah.
So
how does the joyful part of your journey in all of its forms, how does that change your relationship with your sisters? Because I know you did this with your family, but did that create better relationships? Did it push people away? Did they want to be mad? Like what were those dynamics like?
Well, I mean, the dynamic again really shifted when Kathleen learned about ACEs and told me and said, hey, it's not what's wrong with us. It's what happened to us. And we all knew, but we didn't talk about it. And so that's when the conversation started in our late 50s. And they weren't easy conversations. Kathleen and I both wanted to write the book first. My twin sister came on later because she needed to work through some things. But, very, very difficult to tell each other some of the things that we needed to tell one another, and yet freeing in a way that they were no longer hidden. For Kathleen, I know it's very difficult for me to tell her things because she was my mother and she had to listen to her children, what she considered to be her children, being hurt. And she didn't realize that we were hurt and that violent things had happened. And I know in her heart of hearts, had she known, she would have done something about it. So that was hard because I knew I was hurting her heart, but we got through it. And for my twin sister and I, we had to talk about the things that made us mad and talk about the things that made us sad. And then just really rely on the bond that we had as twins to get us through. So we all were in the same household, but we all experienced things differently. So it's amazing how people think it would be the same, but it was very, very different.
Yeah, no, and I think that's important. The more conversations that we have about these things, maybe the more people we can help speak up earlier or do what they need to do earlier. And I think maybe the time period didn't help that when you were going through this, because the society was very secretive in general anyway. But nowadays it feels like people like yourself bringing them up later in life to share, publicly out giving that quote unquote permission to other people that they can also share their story. They don't have to keep it a secret anymore. Not to normalize it, but to normalize that there's almost everyone has something
Absolutely.
that they've kept
Absolutely.
inside. And I don't know, there's something very freeing about being able to share how you actually feel.
Oh,
instead
very,
of
very freeing.
what you're supposed to, by your parents, you're supposed to feel this way, or you have to be an atheist, like in your case.
Exactly is. So, you get the chance to say, here's the piece that, I would change. Here's the part of me that I wouldn't, and explore all of that. So it is very freeing. And just the knowledge that we started learning about the neuroscience of trauma and what it does to your brain and how it changes you, and then the things that you need to do to better help yourself, and that you're not your responses. And then you look at your coping mechanisms and say, which of those are most helpful now? Which ones can I put in the back seat, so to speak? So it's a constant learning, but I would say to anyone that's been through something difficult, read as much as you can and listen to podcasts and go to conferences and learn everything you can learn, because it opens up a world of possibilities for yourself in terms of your healing journey. And I think that's important. Very, very important. And we were lucky. We had a community where we could work when we were young. I could afford to take care of myself because I had money from working. Nowadays, kids can't get a work permit, I think, till they're like 16. So we were able to afford saving up the kind of money that, literally the night I graduated from high school, I left. So, we had a community.
You shouldn't have to work to do what you needed done.
No, but we were able to. And I think about, what if we weren't able to, or what if we didn't have a good community? What if our school system wasn't good? What if we had some of those other aces, like, violent community, or, something like that? But we were lucky that we had a nice little community to be in. And although we didn't talk about what happened to us, and we were all straight A students, and people were quite surprised when we wrote the book, we were supported in ways that no one knew they were actually supporting us, by the way the teachers were with us and other community members. And I think that's what helped us become as resilient as we were.
Yeah, because it wasn't every hour of your day doom.
Right, exactly.
Although, I can't imagine that doesn't, I'm sure it helps and it's a little bit, but you can't overcome all that as a child. You don't have any tools and the people around you. I had two questions. One being, do you think that, this is kind of a silly question, but do you think that you went into these fields that were all helping others because you kind of wanted to help that child version of you and your sisters?
I think so. Yeah, definitely. I think that, a lot of the individuals that I met, even on EMS or in nursing professions, have also had difficult times. So I think you gravitate toward making life better for others. Therefore, it makes you feel good that you helped. Yeah, I definitely think so. Yes.
Fill some kind of cup. And I guess in a small way, like doing this podcast, I think of like, had the 8-year-old version of me heard the 45-year-old version of me, like living a good life and being okay now, maybe it would have been a little different, 8 to 20 something, where I was really struggling. But, so I try to think of that as I have these conversations of like, what if there's just someone out there that feels like they're the only ones going through it? Because it definitely feels like that in the moment.
It does.
It feels like no one would understand because no one would ever feel this way. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that have felt a lot of similar ways to the way that we have felt, despite living completely different lives, which is really interesting. I was thinking, you said you listened to your parents like later in life when they were older. Did you uncover things that made them make more sense in their own lived experiences?
I did. In my mother, I just became to understand that she was very timid And she fell for my father, and individuals who have a personality like my father tend to prey on folks like that. And so once she was in the marriage, I think she felt trapped and nowhere to go. So she actually just kind of disappeared into her own world and pretended like nothing bad was happening, because that was her way of coping. Even though she very clearly knew, she just chose to act like nothing bad was happening. And that was her way of coping.
Out of fear, I'm guessing.
Out of fear as well.
Yeah.
My father, surprisingly, was Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. I mean, I describe him as the person who could be my rock, and then the person who was the absolute worst nightmare anyone could experience. So he taught me a lot about life, and a lot about this world, and a lot about coping in the world, and then it would all go dark. So it was one of those really weird relationships. But then learning about what had happened to him from his father, and then what had happened to his father from my grandfather's mother, made me realize that, there was a lot there before they even had children. So, that they never got help with. It doesn't, but it helped me understand
that you didn't want to continue it.
Yeah. Oh, I can't imagine, but my dad was an alcoholic by the time he was 14. So, he drank to not remember. And so, he had his vices, so to speak,
Yeah, and you, I mean, it doesn't excuse anything, but you kind of just start seeing these cycles, and then someone, you and your sisters, or you, break the cycle and stop this from happening. And admitting, I mean, as sad as it sounds, admitting that you wanted to seek help so you could be a mother, like you could be a good mother and help your children play and learn and do all those things. There's so much beauty in that, admitting, like, because I think sometimes people are like too, quote unquote, proud to ask for help in those situations. But like, how beautiful that is, because you knew how important that was to you, but also to your kids.
Oh yeah. I did not want anything. I didn't want to have anything to do with the way I was parented, but I didn't know how to change it, and I didn't know what the right course would be. So I knew I needed help. Thank goodness, actually. So,
did you enjoy motherhood, or do you enjoy motherhood?
Yes. Yeah, very much so. Very much
more or less than grandmotherhood.
Well, I mean, I love it all. I love it all, but it's just, I wish I wouldn't, I do wish that the 20-year-old knew what the 50-year-old knows, because I do think of times when I was dysregulated and would raise my voice or say something that shouldn't have been said. And, I never hit my children. I never hurt them or anything, but I think that I'm a better version now than I was then. And I kind of beat myself up for that. And yet when I talk with my children, that's not their perspective. But that's why we teach regulation now. I think everyone needs to recognize when they're becoming dysregulated and what can you do about that, and that you have the power to work on those types of responses, and you can learn how to change and grow. So it's like, yeah, just, I would love for no child to ever go through the things that cause them damage, but it's my utopia world. Tough battle is right. Yeah.
And speaking of that, how did you get into the work that you're doing now with your nonprofit, and like what pushed you into that side more?
Well, after we wrote the book, we got involved with Johnson County Mental Health in Kansas City, and Kathleen and I had several conversations about some of the things written in the book, like the power of regulation and responses and understanding what reflection can do, and help you learn, change, grow. And we always thought somebody was going to teach that. And then we didn't find that anyone was teaching it. And so Kathleen called me one day again and said, I think we need to bring this forward. I think we need to help individuals understand on a basic level what this means, because you can read about it in a book or you can go to therapy. But even in therapy, I mean, I didn't know about ACEs. I didn't know about dysregulation. And I'd had a lot of therapy. And so it's like, and Kathleen has a son with persistent mental illness, and she had a lot of difficulty parenting him because she couldn't access the system. He was either not bad enough or whatever. And so she wanted to learn some of these things. So she and he weren't dysregulated with one another. So we just decided to just start learning again and put it down, pen and paper, and make a simple way for individuals to understand some of the things that are not hidden from you, but you can have access to learn more about yourself and your behavior. So that's what got us into it. And we've just continued along the way and try to do as much work as we can with individuals that, have had trauma in their life or are incarcerated. I'm particularly fond of helping those that have been incarcerated because probably 90% of them have had significant trauma in their life. And, the 12-and-a-half-year-old could have gone to juvenile detention as well, and then some. So I feel like it's important to spread that knowledge around. And I feel like I said to Kathleen, we went through what we went through in order to be strong and be able to help teach and spread the information and spread the love and the understanding and give the grace. And otherwise, none of it makes sense to me. I think you have to kind of make sense of it too.
Yeah. It's really challenging
It is.
to think that. I mean, it's very big of you and very, very evolved of you, I guess, as a human to see that. And I have a hard time saying it, but I also see it in my own journey. If my mom hadn't died and my dad and I struggled through that, years of that, then I wouldn't be this version of myself. I wouldn't have access to empathy, like I just wouldn't have these things had I not gone through all of that mess. And 20 years of failing at grief is my, what I call it, and then when I figured it out, everything else made sense. And, you get to the point where you're like, well, if I went back and changed any of that, none of this would be this.
Right. Or who would I be? Or what would I know?
But I would want to change that because I wouldn't want to go through it. So it's very, for you too.
It's one of those situations where you're like, yeah, I'd give anything to, I'm not a perfect person. I still see children playing on a playground and think, oh man, could I just have a do-over, And I have grief and I have times when I cry or whatever, but I also just then think, well, who are you now? And who can you help? And because of this, that's why. And so I tell myself give it a different narrative,
It's a dichotomy of feeling, like don't want to ever happen, but also if it didn't happen in that way, you wouldn't have this version of your life. You wouldn't have these kids. You would, like all the things that come along with it.
And I don't want people to think that I am perfect that way, because I know that individuals struggle and I struggle. I struggled during COVID with the mask. I had to go back into therapy and I could not wear one. I just couldn't. So I tried and I failed, and I had to decide that I just had to stay inside and not wear the mask. So there are some decisions that you have to make that, you do your best, and that's the way it is.
Well, I mean, I think you're doing a damn good job with the joy and the things that could, just one of the experiences that you had could derail a life completely, right? And you had so many stacked upon, and you've created this in which your life is all about helping other people, including yourself and your children and your sisters and the people around, including your parents, after all that. So thank you for showing up in the world in the way you do, because so many people are benefiting because of your resilience and strength.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope to
There's
think that.
no doubt, not a doubt at all. I like to kind of ask a question, but I don't know who to ask. But if you, knowing what you know now, is there anything that you, maybe when your dog brought you out to that river and you were sitting there, is there anything that this version of you would want to say to that version of you?
I think that the person now would say to her, it's not your fault. You didn't know that you could fight back. You were afraid. I'll take you into my heart and protect you. And you are protected now whenever you feel vulnerable. I think that's what she would say. And that she would also say, you felt the love of God then. And he has been the one that has carried you through in all of your darkest moments. And there's a lot of times when I just say the universe, because I talk to the universe all the time. I don't know out there, but
someday we'll all find out.
Someday we'll all find out. And I'm so grateful for that moment. I'm so grateful. I can't even tell people how grateful I am that I'm still here. And even when I go through really bad times, I've had 23 abdominal surgeries and all kinds of things, but I tell myself that tomorrow will be better. The sun will come up and you still want to be here. Because what if you miss this? Or what if you miss that? And for me, I'm also grateful that she had an innate curiosity about the world. And I've continued to have that, so that I bring on experiences that challenge me all the time and teach me. And I keep learning and growing. And I'm so grateful for that part of my personality.
And you're creating a legacy now of like-minded folks. You're with your children and with your grandchildren, and that's on purpose. Like, I mean, you're doing it with the heart, with full heart, and creating a better world for the rest of us because of that. And then all the people that you're helping through your organization and your book and going on podcasts and sharing your story. Who knows who's listening right now that hears something and feels compelled to take a different step, or feels less alone, or feels more empowered. We never know how all this works out. And so I'm just so grateful that you wanted to have the conversation in this way with me.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's just, I think that the work you're doing, the work that many people do around the world is just so enlightening. And the more we know, the more we can learn, change, and grow.
Yeah.
And help
So
others
important.
do that as well.
Yeah. And I'd love to encourage people to check out what you're offering to the world. So if people are listening, they feel really compelled, they either want to send you a message and just tell you their story, or ask you a question, or go to your website, or what's the best way to like find you, learn what you're bringing to the world, or just send you a message and say, hey, thank you.
They can send me a message at Karen@remarkably-resilient.com. That's my email. And a lot of people do. And I'm happy to have those conversations. And then www.remarkably-resilient.com. So, and then of course our book is out on Amazon, and that's Remarkably Resilient Community Matters.
Will there be a link to that on your website?
There is.
Perfect.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then there's videos they can watch, and we just try to help out in every way possible.
I love that. Well, I will include your website address there. That's the one-stop shop where they can kind of find everything. And they heard you say your email. I'm not going to put it there, so everyone in the world will be clicking on it. But I encourage anyone listening, if something that Karen said like resonated with you or hit you in a certain way, I highly encourage reaching out. I think that there's so much power in telling our stories. In whatever way that feels most comfortable. It doesn't have to be in a podcast. It could just be in a quick message. It could be just out loud in your space and no one's around, but getting it out feels quite different. At least for me, things are really messy in my head, but when I say them out loud, it feels all palatable. It feels like the papers are in order. So I highly encourage listeners to reach out to the guests, because I think there's there's so much value in the connection and sharing our stories with each other. So do that, and they'll go to check out your book and check out your website and do all the things that they are called to do. And I really appreciate you sharing this time with me, Karen.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And I will thank our listeners as well. Going on 5 years now, and I am so grateful to be able to have all these conversations and to have all of you listening. So thank you for supporting what I do. And with that, I will be back next week with a brand new episode. Thanks again, Karen. Thank you for listening to the Life Shift Podcast. If you want to learn more, go to www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com. There you can check out all the different episodes. You can check out the blog, some of the reviews for the podcast, and the Life Shift Journal. Links are there, so you can purchase your own copy, whether in digital or print format. Thanks again.